Good morning. Welcome to our panel, which is titled In the Crosshairs, a look at for-profit providers of higher education. My name is Tom Lindsay, and I'm the director of the Center for Higher Education at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. For-profit higher education has, in the last few years, come under intense political scrutiny. On the one hand, critics of for-profit higher ed seek to impose ever greater regulation of the for-profit sector in order to address the abuses committed by a few, about five, in the industry. On the other hand, free market champions argue that the unduly burdensome regulation of the for-profit sector threatens to strangle in their cradles new entrants to the field and therewith stifles much-needed innovation. To discuss these topics and others related to for-profit education, we have three very distinguished panelists. I'll introduce each of them as they come up to give their presentations, and then after they've concluded their presentations, we'll open it up to questions and answers. We'll begin with Dr. William Pepicello, who is the president of the University of Phoenix.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd first like to amend the title of the session from In the Crosshairs to In the Spotlight, because I think what In the Crosshairs has a different implication. But what I'd like to do is spotlight today some of the aspects of for-profit higher education by talking about University of Phoenix, who we are, how we're regulated, and how we respond to that regulation. But first, just to give you a sort of a basic overlay of the University of Phoenix, we are the largest regionally accredited for-profit institution in the United States, have been accredited since 1978 continuously. But we also, in addition to regional accreditation, have programmatic accreditation in nursing, counseling, business, and education programs, and currently offer over 20 degree programs with 50 concentrations. We have a little over 300,000 students, both in physical classrooms and online. The average age is, give or take, in the mid-30s. Our classroom, average class size, whether it's online or in the physical classroom, is about 15 students or fewer. Last year we graduated 100,000 students, and they joined an alumni network of approaching 800,000 graduates at this point in the university's history. We have over 30,000 associate faculty around the world who teach many of our courses, and we have some 1,500 core faculty, full-time faculty, who oversee that. We were the first private institution of higher education to offer completely online programs beginning in 1989. That was before Al Gore had invented the World Wide Web. And since our inception in 1976, we have pioneered many of the conveniences that students now enjoy as a regular course of their education, including evening classes, accelerated classes, flexible and continuous scheduling for students, a university-wide academic social network, online classes, and digital libraries and computer simulations, which now are fairly common. In Texas, here comes the 9:35. In Texas, we have physical locations in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and El Paso, where students attend physical classes. We have been approved by the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and since 2000, I was the person who had the pleasure of working with the coordinating board to get the original approvals here, which is why I not only can get all the letters in the right order, but I know what they stand for, since this is one of the more challenging acronyms in higher education. We currently have about 47,000 students in Texas. We have graduated 10,000 students in the last year here. We have 60,000 alumni in Texas, and 2,300 of our faculty members are located in Texas. Just a few words about our students. Over the entire course of our history, we have served the adult learner, although what it means to be an adult learner has changed significantly over the years as the demographics of the United States has changed. Our mission has remained the same, and that is to serve people who otherwise would not have access to higher education through our traditional higher education system. Our students tend to be somewhat older. They are working either full or part-time. They have family obligations and need to be able to integrate higher education into their lives in the same way that they can integrate other parts of their lives via the internet. We are regulated in a variety of ways. We are perhaps the most regulated institution of higher education in the United States and possibly even in the world. As I mentioned, we do have regional accreditation and programmatic accreditations, and so we are responsible to those accrediting bodies. We also, of course, are responsible to the Department of Education because that is the doorway for our ability to give our students access to Title IV financial aid. In addition to accreditation and into the federal regulations, of course, and part of the reason that I'm here today is that we also have to be authorized in the states in which we operate, in particular those states where we are an out-of-state institution. Each state has a different set of regulations, so in fact, the fact that we are currently approved to operate in 36 states, as well as Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., indicates that we have another 38 regulators to whom we are responsible on a yearly basis. The upshot of this is that there are a number of issues that apply to primarily proprietary or for-profit higher education institutions to which we need to respond not just in a purely responsive way, but in a proactive way. One of these has to do with a concern that the government had about how students are recruited and how our people are compensated for how students are recruited. These were regulations that were called Safe Harbor, but essentially it was the government's concern that students not be aggressively recruited and put into class if they did not have a reasonable chance to succeed. The University of Phoenix was out in front of this legislation. Our crack lobbyist team, some of whom are sitting with us today, and our state and our regulatory folks, saw this coming in anticipation of regulations that we knew were going to be put in place. The university, beginning in 2010, changed the compensation structure for our recruiting and enrollment people. The basic upshot of the regulation is that you should not compensate enrollment people for enrolling people. And if that sounded strange, it is. But remember, we're talking about the federal government. So we changed the entire nature of our compensation structure to adjust to that. If you follow anything about the University of Phoenix, you will know that this adversely affected our enrollments, but that was intentional. We knew that would happen, and it gave us the opportunity to focus our resources not just on the enrollment side, but on the ability to have students succeed, for them to persist all the way to graduation. And I'll talk a bit about some of the initiatives we put in place to deal with that. Essentially, in order to stay ahead of some of the trends in higher education, one of the things that is a benefit of being in the proprietary world is that we have the ability to redirect resources fairly nimbly to initiatives. And I want to talk just briefly about some of the initiatives that we have implemented in the last several years that are designed as student protections. They are designed to help students understand the nature of higher education, their obligation to higher education, and what they need to be able to succeed. One thing is we have put in place for any student who comes to us with fewer than 24 transfer credits, we have a mandatory 3-week orientation course that is offered at no cost to students, where they get a taste of what it will be like to come to University of Phoenix. This course has, over a period of time, reduced our incoming student population by nearly 20%. And as I said earlier, that was intentional. We knew that would happen. We also have what we call the Phoenix Prep Center, where students can come and without any pressure, they can go through a set of assessments that will help them determine whether or not they are really ready academically to come into the university. We also give them the opportunity to see whether they're ready financially to come. We provide a financial aid calculator, which is standard now in higher education, but we also provide a financial planning tool so that a student can, with the help of this tool, understand how they will be able to repay whatever debt they have at the end of their program, and we essentially help them amortize it in the same way that you would a mortgage payment or a car payment, so that they understand that this will have to be part of their budget going forward. This, in higher education, is innovative. We also have Phoenix Connect, which is an academic social network that is available to all of our students, faculty, and alumni, where we can connect those various constituencies in ways that they find most beneficial to them. We have an initiative called Education to Careers, whereby when students come to us, the initial conversation we have with them has to do with what their career aspirations are, what they think they might want to do. We help them profile themselves. We talk with them about what careers are available in the areas where they live. And then what we are in the process of doing now is working with some 2,000 corporate partners across the country, both nationally and locally, to help link students and employers, so that when a student comes to the University of Phoenix, they know that the programs are tied to competencies that we have developed in conjunction with employers across the country, and employers know that students who come out of our programs have been through a program that meets requirements that they have helped us to develop. So when a student comes to the university now, we can help them develop both an academic plan, so that they know why they're there and what they can expect, and we help them develop the financial plan so that they know that their investment of time and energy will have a return for them at the time that they graduate. So essentially, what we have done as we respond to the exigencies of the current regulatory environment is rechannel our energies, rechannel our resources in ways that we hope will keep us as one of the leading student service providers across the United States for higher education. I think with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pepicello. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Lynn Tatum, who's Senior Lecturer of Religion in the Honors College at Baylor University, Associate Director of Middle East Studies, and the past president of the Texas chapter of the American Association of University Professors. Dr. Tatum?
Thank you. Well, if you saw a detailed schedule, you would have noticed that Ann McGlashan was scheduled to speak here. I'm not Ann McGlashan. I got a weird call Wednesday night by this husky, a sultry voice saying, "Is Lynn Tatum there?" But it had a Scotch accent. I'm going, "Is this Ann McGlashan?" She says, "I'm dying." So I kind of got called in at the last minute. I am not an expert on for-profit education. What I'm really going to talk about is academic standards. I am a past president of the American Association of University Professors in Texas. And for those of you who are not in education, let me just give you a very quick introduction to AAUP. It is the major trans-disciplinary organization. Most of us in academia, we are members of our own professional organization, Middle East Studies Association, in my case, or the American Academy of Religion. AAUP is the transdisciplinary organization that sets standards, maintains standards for the academic community. So when you, AAUP is to, for example, academic freedom, while the NAACP is to, excuse me, is to civil rights. And my guess is your university does not have an academic freedom, a detailed academic freedom policy in your university handbook. It will typically say something to the effect of, we adhere to the principles of academic freedom as articulated by the AAUP. There are two basic principles that AAUP advocate: academic freedom and shared governance, and we'll come back to those in just a few minutes. What I want to talk about is, I'm an ancient Near Eastern archaeologist, and so I can't talk without dealing a little bit with history. I'm not going to go back to the Bronze Age, but let me go back about 1,000 years. The modern university system really arose out of the old guild system. So if you wanted to be a goldsmith in the Middle Ages, what you did is you would find a master goldsmith and you would apprentice with them and learn the basic the basic techniques. After you had learned the basic techniques, the basic principles, you then became a journeyman and you began to perfect that. You began to work at it, and ultimately, if you ever became good enough, you would work on a piece of art, a chalice that demonstrated virtuosic goldsmithing, and then you would take that piece to the master goldsmiths, and they would judge it, does this reach to the level of a master's piece? And if it did, then you became a master goldsmith. And that basically, we talk about the master's degree, that's what we're talking about. It comes from that old tradition. There in Bologna, there were physicians that began to gather around Bologna and formed the School of Medicine in Bologna, a School of Law in Bologna, really arguably the earliest university in Europe. France had its great teachers, scholars there, Peter Abelard. University of Paris began to be founded there. You've got other scholars, teachers, that were using this old system of mentoring students, training students, and then ultimately, if they reached the standard of the academy, it wouldn't be a gold chalice, it would be a piece of scholarship, a master's thesis, and then they would be welcomed in to the community as peers, masters. And by the way, they used to eat off little flat things that they carried around their lunch in, and they would actually put it on top of their head like this, which is why still today, when you go to a graduation, that goes back to the early universities. And they would carry their lunch actually in a little hood, and at academic institutions, you'll always see doctors with the hood that's got a little sack in the back of it that used to keep sandwiches back a millennium ago. And this guild of teachers then, like the guild of goldsmiths or silversmiths or glaziers, took it upon themselves to set the standards, maintain the standards, uphold the standards. The guild of the teachers, the Latin term for guild is universitas, and that's where we get the term university, the guild of the teachers. And so from the very, very beginning of the modern university, we had at its DNA core the setting, the maintenance, the upholding of serious academic standards. Now, to the for-profits. There have been, Tom mentioned here, a lot of the areas in which they have come under attack. I would see that for-profits, one of the biggest challenges for the for-profit institutions is how to maintain academic standards. If you're going to call your university, what exactly does that mean? From the very beginning, the function of the university was to uphold standards. One of the three primary functions of a university. Number one, teaching, okay? We all know that one. Number two is the discovery of new knowledge. And number three is quality control, maintaining standards. When you went to university, you were daily quizzed, examined, tested over what you knew. In the modern university system, professors are constantly tested, challenged, peer reviewed. You don't get your books published unless other scholars have pronounced that this is serious scholarship. So those are the three functions of the university. And to do that, AUP has argued that there are two principles to maintain these standards. Number one, academic freedom. The idea that each of us are obligated to teach about, write about, to research about the best that is known in our discipline. The AAUP was founded about 100 years ago in order to protect academic freedom. What happened, there was a university in Northern California that a professor had been fired not because he was inaccurate or incompetent. He was fired because his views disagreed with a major donor to that university, the major donor to that university. He was fired even though his teaching was accurate, his writing was contemporary. I won't embarrass that university by mentioning its name. I will tell you that the donor's wife was named Mrs. Leland Stamford. And out of that, major professors across America, William Dewey being probably the most well-known of them, formed the AAUP in order to set the standards for the academy. The two standards being academic freedom, and the other is shared governance. Now, shared governance, we don't have time to get into the details of that, but basically shared governance recognizes that there are three kind of decision-making bodies at a university. The Board of Regents, or I would suppose in the for-profit sector, that would be the shareholders, I would guess. The administrator, the president, and then the faculty. And according to the professional organizations of both the administrators, okay, the American Council on Education, and board members, the Association of the Governing Boards, the argument is that on issues of curriculum, on issues of who should be hired to teach, on what should be taught, that should be vested with the faculty. The board lays out the general organization, the general direction of the university. The president runs the day-to-day affairs of the university, and the faculty set, maintain, and uphold the standards of the academy. And here, I think, is where we're going to find that for-profit universities are going to have, or have had a problem being accepted in the broader academy, and it has to do with that issue of credibility. And I think that that's what for-profits are going to have to work on, is that issue of credibility. The term credibility comes from that old Latin phrase, to believe. Okay? Can you believe what they are doing? It's the root, by the way, behind accreditation. Can we believe what is going on here? Historically, at other universities, it has been the faculty that have been the sentinels of high academic standards. Typically, at for-profits, faculty are contract employees. They are not permanent. They operate on a term. The contract can be non-renewed for any reason. And that creates a problem, is can the for-profits come up with an alternative system that will assure students who are paying their tuition, can assure the tax-paying public, because something on the order of about 90% of the income to for-profits in one way or another are connected to federal aid. So the taxpayer, I think, has a serious interest in this. And then finally, for those in the traditional academy, have you come up with a system, a mechanism to protect academic freedom and shared governance, to protect the goal of the university, which is not to serve either the faculty or the board. There's a common phrase used both by AAUP, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, which is that universities function for the public good. We are to produce graduates, and by the way, I reject the idea that students are customers. Students are products, okay? Universities are supposed to shape these students so that they come out, and it is society, through tax dollars, through your donations to universities, that expect a good return, expect a product, well-educated, thoughtful, higher order thinking students. And that's the end of my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Tatum. Next, we'll hear from Jeff Sandifer, who is the co-founder of the Acton School of Business, which is consistently one of the top-ranked entrepreneurship programs in the country. Jeff has been long involved in the cause of higher ed reform. Jeff?
Thanks, Tom. Well, I think my role here today, or at least I see it, is to be representative of students and taxpayers. And just to let you know, I come from this as a perspective of a teacher. I taught middle school this morning at our Acton Academy, which last year was named, its elementary school was named the single best disruptive new school, meaning all the newest technology and approaches to project-based learning in the United States. This afternoon I'll teach at the Acton MBA program, and then I'll go back and teach again at the middle school. So I'm here really as a teacher, as a successful entrepreneur, and on behalf of students and taxpayers. With all due respect, while we could have an interesting argument about whether students are customers or not, as a teacher, I absolutely reject the thought that students are ever products. I consider that a dehumanizing thing. Our students are absolutely geniuses and precious beings, and we treat them as such. We may in fact refer to students and teachers, students and parents as customers. More likely they are really partners in their own education, but we consider them very precious. As a disruptor, I think this whole idea of profit, not for profit, is actually a distraction. So if you're a legislator or you're on the legislative staff, it's the equivalent of a magician hoping that you'll watch this hand while you don't watch this hand reaching into your wallet. This is all about money, don't kid yourself. It's about money with the AAUP, which I do agree is a guild. There's another word for that. It's called a union. Nothing wrong with that. Guilds were set up both to maintain standards and to make sure that no one else got in the business because it was bad for profits. Again, nothing wrong. It's an honest role. The for-profits, I'm a big fan of Phoenix. They represent the Phoenix shareholders. As a Phoenix shareholder, I would expect you to have crack lobbyists. Nothing wrong with that. Let's put up barriers to competition. We would teach our students to do that. However, I don't think it's profits and nonprofits. Again, that's an IRS designation, a distraction. I think it's about traditional approaches to education and disruptive. And what I mean by disruptive is using the newest technologies, the newest approaches, game-based adaptive learning, project-based learning, putting people in the field, learning for real. We don't think about online education at Acton. We think about putting an iPad in your hands where you're practicing selling door to door, if that's what we have you doing, and you're getting direct feedback as you do that in the world. It really is a return in many ways to the apprentice-master approach to education done well, which I think, frankly, is behind America's ability to continue to compete. We had an apprentice-master system, the one-room schoolhouse back during the Revolution. We got organized schooling in the 1850s, and ever since then, our literacy rates have gone down decade by decade as we've spent more and more money. So I do agree that the return to the apprentice-master system is exactly what we need to do, enabled by new technology. So here's the framing for you. I think it's between the disruptors and the traditionalists, all with good motives. It's all about money. And it's really like the Berlin Wall. And the Berlin Wall is called prestige and accreditation. And my call to you, if you are a legislator or a staffer, is give the people of Texas a hammer. Give parents, give students, give taxpayers a hammer to knock down the Berlin Wall, and let's see which way the people go. There's a tsunami of change coming. I think you're going to see pricing collapse. I think you're going to see accreditation weakened. I think that's actually a good thing. Accreditation is mostly nonsense, the way it's practiced now. It's an anti-competitive force. We do need great standards. Just like anything else in the world, those should be set by the people the customers, the teachers, the customers, the parents, the students. I think the traditional university, including Phoenix, is in a better position, but I think the traditional university is actually in big trouble. They have high fixed and ever-increasing fixed cost, buildings and tenured faculty, with a governance problem that 51% of those tenured faculty can keep voting themselves a raise, and they're losing marginal high-paying cost customers to this tsunami of new approaches. That's a good thing. We're finding that we can get better and better educations for cheaper and cheaper at the margin, but if you're running a high fixed cost business and you're losing marginal full paying price customers to an alternative, to a better substitute, your financial model is in big trouble. And so I think we're going to see a lot of change happen. That's good. The Phoenixes of the world will adapt more quickly, while they will be working on putting up anti-competitive barriers, as they should. Traditional academia, among which I have many, many, many friends that are terrific teachers, will react more slowly, but I think will react too, and will actually have an increase in quality. During that, my guess is about half the universities we have now go out of business, though, because they won't adapt quickly enough. So I think the place I want to leave you is just, if you're a legislator or staffer, this disruption is going to result in a lot of gnashing of teeth and a lot of finger pointing and a lot of, I mean, don't mistake it, it's all about the money. That's okay. It's about, I would love to teach very few classes, get paid a lot, and do academic research. I like academic research. The question is, how do we set standards for that? We did a study recently that showed that 10% of the faculty at UT and Texas A&M do 90% of the academic research. I think we need more of it. Let's find out why that 10% does so much funded research. Let's have them do more. I also think, though, that the idea, for example, and I'll use UT just because I happen to know the example, but it's true for any major university across the country. UT's building a new engineering building for $300+ million, a new business building for $150 million, $450 million. You know the net increase projected of undergraduate students in engineering at UT and business at UT? Net increase undergraduate students for $450 million, zero. The projected increase over 10 years, zero. $450 million at $10,000 degree is 45,000 more college degrees. So we need to break the Berlin Wall of accreditation, of this stonewalling. We need to arm the students with Texas grants. So if you're a legislator, put more money in Texas grants. Let people vote with their feet. Let them find the most effective, the most cost-efficient ways to learn, and you will do traditional education, both for-profit and not-for-profit, a great favor. You will help them change faster so they can serve those that they want to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We're ready now to turn to questions from the audience, but before we do, please join me in thanking our three panelists.
I have a question, and in terms of full disclosure for the two legislators in the room, they'll bust me if I don't say it. I'm the lobbyist for the career colleges and schools of Texas, but I do have a question for our esteemed professor on the panel. Are your concerns that you have founded if the gentleman's institution to your left are regulated by the exact same federal agency, state agency, and federally recognized accrediting bodies as you are?
Could you repeat the first part of that question? I've got a cold, so I'm a little bit...
Are your concerns that you mentioned founded if proprietary schools are not only recognized but approved by the exact same federal agencies, state agencies, and federally and state recognized accrediting bodies as you are, as your school is?
I think we may all agree that there are certain issues with accreditation. I mean, there are real problems with accreditation, and I think what we would probably disagree. Well, I certainly would disagree with Jeff over the issue of who kind of makes these decisions. Do we turn it over to students, for example, or parents to determine what is good, correct, or do we turn it over to, let's say, the mathematicians on how math should be taught? What are the curriculum standards? And I'm used to teaching in the classroom. Imagine, if you will, I put 1 + 1 equals, okay, and you know what I'm going to put next is going to be 2. But what if I'm applying for a job at your school and I put 10, okay? Most of you would say, don't want to hire him, doesn't know what he's talking about, doesn't know simple math. But those of you who are in mathematics or in engineering, computer engineering, would go, oh, he has switched to a binary system. Actually, 1 + 1 equals what we normally think of 10. Matter of fact, that's how you write 10. The number 2 in binary is 1, 0. One of my son's in engineering, his favorite sweatshirt is there are 10 types, it looks like 10 types of people in the world, those who know binary and those who don't. The point I'm trying to make is what can seem banal, silly, or simply wrong to someone who's not an expert in the field may be insightful, cutting edge, and even transformative for those within the field.
Are you splitting hairs with the credit cards?
No, I don't think so. What happens at a traditional university, the mathematics curriculum is set by the mathematics professors. They decide who are to be the mathematics professors and how those and how that is taught. What I think that the for-profits are faced with, and that system seems to work. Whatever school you graduated from, it was the French professors that set the curriculum for French in your school. If we have those, in traditional schools, it is that role of the faculty to be the sentinels for good, accurate teaching. And thus far, the for-profits that I'm aware of have not come up with a credible alternative. Now, I'm not sure are you asking, would I be satisfied that a for-profit school, just if it received accreditation, would I be satisfied that it was functioning with the high standards of the academy? Is that?
I think you expressed concern about accreditation of for-profit schools or proprietary schools. And I know that Phoenix is an HLC school, but there are 2 for-profit schools in Texas, one operating under the approval and accreditation of SACS, and one operating under the approval and accreditation of WAC. Is Baylor accredited by
SACS.
That's right. Okay.
So the Southern Association of Colleges.
Okay.
Dr. Pepicelli, you also wanted to get in on this?
Well, yeah, I would like to give you an example of a for-profit that works exactly the way you outlined, and that is the faculty does determine our curriculum. They decide what should be there. They decide who is qualified to teach in line with the standards of accreditation. We operate in all 6 regional accrediting regions, and so we're subject to a bit more regulation because everybody gets to weigh in. Yeah. But I also want to make it clear for those of you who are not all aware of the structure of for-profit companies that it's not the case that the shareholders have any say in what happens at my university. We are not beholden to the shareholders. They do not interact with the university. In fact, I report to a board of directors, as would the president of any university, which is not to say that I don't have responsibilities to our parent company, because in fact, University of Phoenix is not a for-profit university. The Apollo Group, which is publicly traded, is the for-profit entity. We are owned by them, and so while I do have that relationship, if you looked at our org chart, it would look very much like a traditional university where there's the board, the president, and the faculty. And in fact, the faculty are the academic engine of our university. If that were not the case, it's not just a matter of regional accreditation, but the fact that we also carry 5 programmatic accreditations and the imprimatur of 36 states, all of which look at the issue of academic governance there. So it's, and I'm not saying that all for-profits work that way, right, but I think at least in our case, and in those that are regionally accredited, you'd find that those are the places that we get most closely looked at.
In terms of who makes the decisions on what faculty are to be hired?
The faculty.
That is, and I mean, there's a variety of models out there.
For full disclosure, my name is Angie Chen Button. I'm a state representative in the Dallas County, the north of the city of Dallas, in Richardson, Garland area, and it's a very, very high-tech concentrated district. And my own background, with my charming English, you know, I wasn't that lucky to be born in this great country, which give me additional goodies because my undergraduate degree is from National Taiwan University. Of course, that's where I was born, in Taiwan. But I also got a graduate degree, master's degree from a great university, UT at Dallas, and I'm so proud of being a UTD alumni. Okay, I'm a business woman. My paid job is with Texas Instruments, and I'm an international marketing manager. So for your wonderful gentlemen, I wish there was a lady, but I understand the situation. Okay. Okay.
Somebody accused me of taking on a sex change operation.
Yeah. Okay. To make my question short. Okay. As being a businesswoman, okay, I like to see that the return of my dollar. Okay. So when a student is somebody is considering going to a college, going to a university, most of the people probably, some of them probably feel like, well, university education is a entertainment, it's something nice to have or whatever, you know, for academic, for your mind, whatever. But I believe the majority of the people are thinking, how can I get a job once I graduate from the university? Doesn't matter if it's for profit or traditional or disrupted, okay? So, by the way, I like your concept about treating as a customer. So my question is there any study to show that, you know, some kind of comparisons among the different sets of concepts in terms of universities, and for the how soon a graduate of that specific institution or whatever can get a job, a reasonable job in the specific field with reasonable pay, something. So a businesswoman, a parent can make a better decision if I should send my kid to that university or Baylor or your school or UTD or whatever.
So can I take that one for a start? It's a great question. It's a difficult one because the question is, what do you want the school to do? I think if you think of in the old style, I want someone to know something, we can give them a fill-in-the-blank test. But that doesn't really tell us much, right? I mean, it just tells us they've learned to know something. And in the internet age, it's pretty easy to know lots of things and specialize. If you want to know how to learn to do something, if there's a computer simulation or you're a doctor, I mean, you have a hard time, you know, judging at the marketplace. Generally has to judge at the end of the day. So I would challenge you as a representative, try this. See if you can get any of the Texas state universities to release or survey their graduates to find out their starting salaries or their salaries 10 years out. Money's not everything. Tom knows I'm a big fan of Life of Meaning. We're all about the liberal arts at our schools and philosophy and the hero's journey. But if we want to measure the business outcome and we want to give parents and students purely on the vocational, meaning getting a job part of vocation as opposed to the Life of Meaning, let's find out my investment in the school, we can measure that, versus did I get a good job? Those stats are simply not available. If you want to think about critical thinking, we do have the CLA, the College Learning Assessment Test. Tom's been very vocal about let's make make that public. It measures critical thinking. One of the most recent studies in Academically Adrift showed that sadly, after 2 years, 45% of students showed zero gains in critical thinking. And after 4 years, I believe, Tom, was it
36% failed to show after 4 years.
Yeah, after 4 years. So, and unfortunately, our Texas schools, UT released some data that showed it had added almost no critical thinking skills. There was all sorts of reasons for that. But let's make the CLA test a requirement, and let's publish those results and see if, so that's critical thinking. We can measure the salaries by asking for what are people making 5 years out and 10 years out and allow students to choose. And the learn to know, Google will take care of a lot of that.
Another problem is that you're going to vary from the type of school. And part of the problem is, I think Jeff said, is do you require, does it make any sense to require a school that's not a vocational school to produce how its graduates do vocationally? For example, at my university, Baylor, basically they're not going in for vocation. About 3/4 of our students end up going to graduate school. So I don't know that would, I really don't think that a lot of our students at Baylor come to Baylor with the idea that when I graduate, I'm looking for a career. This is to teach me the critical thinking skills so that I can then go on either to a law school or a medical school. So that's part of the problem of how do you get that information out. Now, for-profits, by and large, it is my sense that they're almost overwhelmingly career-oriented. That's what their advertising is about. That's what their marketing about. Go here, you will get this job. There have been attempts, and it's still tied up in the courts that probably Bill can tell you a lot more about, the gainful employment rule. The Department of Education specifically wanted that information from those schools that are vocational schools or for-profit schools and even private schools that their goal is vocation. It's typically been, or not typically, it was opposed by what would you say, your lobbying group, your, the for-profits opposed it. There were some court cases, there was a court case on it. It's apparently in abeyance, though it's not entirely clear how much it's in abeyance.
That's correct.
Would you be in favor, I'm sorry, Bill just would say, would you be in favor, since it's critical thinking is what, if that's what we're trying to do at Baylor to get students to grad school, to Baylor releasing its CLA scores?
I don't think we do CLA scores.
Does Baylor, do students take the collegiate learning assessment? Baylor?
No, they don't. A growing number of schools are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, and that raises the issues private versus public.
It would be interesting to see if, in fact, those critical thinking scores are increasing.
I think that practically speaking, for the legislature to mandate that would be almost impossible.
They can't in a private school, but it would be interesting in public schools to see it.
Well, I should just add to that there's a lot more harmony between the critical thinking scores and ability to get a job. We did a panel on the CLA yesterday, and there it was revealed that students that score in the upper quartile in critical thinking as measured by the CLA have only a 3% unemployment rate. Those who score in the bottom quartile on the CLA have a 12% unemployment rate. So there isn't such a disjunction between critical thinking skills and job skills, especially in today's economy as we move from the industrial to the information age. As we know, you can't teach a narrow set of skills anymore and hope to survive. Instead, you have to teach, you somehow have to try to engender in your students the depth and the breadth and the creativity and the vision and the critical thinking and the complex reasoning required to adapt to change. And that's what the CLA measures. But I know that Dr. Papicello, you wanted to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, first, I would direct anyone who's interested to go to the University of Phoenix website, where you can get access to our academic annual report, which is a completely transparent look at how our students perform against students across the country, not just students in the for-profit sector. I certainly agree that critical thinking is a large part of that. Since my university has the largest school of business in the country and the largest school of nursing in the country and the largest school of education in the country, I should hope that we are infusing some element of critical thinking into those people who are going out and becoming leaders in those areas. But, and let me preface my next remarks by explaining that I am a liberal arts person. My degrees are in Latin and Greek and linguistics, which clearly qualify me for the job that I have now. But the point is that when I graduated from my PhD program in 1980, a good liberal arts degree was your ticket to success in the world. I didn't worry about what I was going to do with my degrees, obviously, or I wouldn't have taken those degrees. But higher education in our country has changed significantly. The students that we're talking about at Baylor or UT who come from high school, have that 4-year residential experience, perhaps go on to graduate school, represent only 25% of all undergraduates in the United States. The other 75% look a lot more like a University of Phoenix student and the students that the proprietary schools are serving, which is why the proprietary schools exploded in the last 15 years, because those people were not, and I'm not being critical of traditional higher education, it wasn't their mission to serve that population. But that population is there and we need to serve it. So in some ways, I would argue that all schools are vocational schools now, because even people graduating from selective liberal arts schools want to know, and their parents want to know, so what's on the other end? And that's what we're trying to respond to.
Yeah, I would only add to that that you're absolutely correct, and let me just give numbers to that. It's something that is surprising to folks, but today the majority of students seeking post-secondary education are non-traditional students. They're either over 25 or working full-time or with families of their own already. It's it's now a minority that fits this little 18 to 20-year-old, 18 to 22-year-old niche where they want to go to a full-time residential college. There was a hand up over here.
Thank you. Jeannie Morrison. I'm in the Texas legislature with Angie also from South Texas. My question is, what you're just talking about is most of the parents now are looking for how is my student going to obtain a job, and I think what Mr. Sandifer said, it would be great to know from all the institutions, the graduates, so what job did you attain and what is the salary? And also career and technology down in my area, we have great explosion of the Eagle Ford Shell. We've got Caterpillar that just moved in. There are not enough people to hire, but what they want are skilled people that can move into the workforce. And so, you know, I agree, the majority or 3/4 of the people, that's what people are looking for, but we're not giving parents or the students that grid to say, okay, what do you want, and this is how you get there. And so I think some of the things of the discussion today are very important so that parents and students can make that determination of where they want to go and how they get there. Critical thinking, absolutely. I mean, if you can have critical thinking and know how to get, you can do almost anything. But today's economy and where the manufacturers are and the jobs are, we need to get people in the workforce quickly. And so I think having that grid is one of the most important things we need to do, and definitely more help scholarship-wise for students that are wanting to do that, but also students that are qualified for the scholarships that can obtain that education and not just take the money and then fail, and we are losing some that never receive it.
Well, if I can respond to that, the gainful employment rule, for those of you who don't know, and I hesitate to jump into this, the gainful employment rule is for colleges that either for-profit or non-profit, that vocation is their primary goal, that they are to report on their websites in a standardized form. And that if they fail that they would become ineligible to receive a VA benefit, a GI Bill, Pell Grants, those kinds of things, which is a major component, of course, for their bottom line. It was the for-profits took that to court. A judge put a stay on it and said that the real issue, as I understand it, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, is that eliminating the federal funds based upon this report, you haven't given a good justification for doing that. But the Department of Education, as I understand it, is still maintaining that these schools should provide that information in a standardized format, readily available on their website. Is that remotely accurate?
It is remotely accurate.
Emphasis on accurate or remote?
Yeah. No, the real basis of what you said, you were correct when you started, is that it's very complex. It's a complex formula that, by the way, was made without any ties to the real world. It says if a student borrows a certain amount of money for a program of study, they should be able to pay that money back within a reasonable length of time based on how much they can expect to earn and how much disposable income they will have when they graduate. The problems are several, but the major ones are that if that's applied only to the proprietary sector, probably the proprietary sector can respond to that. If, however, it then is applied to the nonprofit sector, most nonprofit schools will not meet those standards, which means that they would become ineligible for the federal funds, and so it's a slippery slope. So are the proprietary schools concerned? Yes, we are concerned because it does seem somewhat punitive to us, but we also think it's not good legislation.
Well, and as with all government intrusion in the private sector, there are complex unintended consequences. But the reasons were pretty simple. The proprietary schools were increasing enrollment and beginning to crimp the style of the not-for-profit schools. So the not-for-profits run to Washington and get a rule put in that we should have, Jeannie, all these disclosures, but only for the for-profit schools. Now, I'm not a fan of government regulation, but at least the disclosure and transparency, if it's good to publish it and publish those rules for the for-profits, why not for the not-for-profits too? And the answer is because they would dismally fail that test. So it's.
I think it does apply to the nonprofits, the gainful employment for those nonprofits who are vocationally oriented.
Well, yeah, okay, but
frankly, and you can see why. Let's take. I've got my doctorate is from Duke University. To ask Duke University to show 2 years out if their students are employed in the field that they train for is silly. Duke doesn't train people for a particular vocation. Some departments do.
But to ask, let's sample let's do a LinkedIn and sample your students 2, 5, 10 years and publish the results of what are they doing, how much are they making, how satisfied are they with their college degree? I mean, at our schools, every week we ask parents and students on a 1 to 5 scale, how satisfied are you, and give us some comments. One of the most incredibly helpful things we do. We get some noise in the data, we get some great comment, but we ask, and our teachers are rewarded based on how satisfied they are. We set very high standards, but so I think the idea of asking, what are your graduates doing, how satisfied are they, what harm can that do to actually give people the real decision-making power? We're talking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars now. This isn't something where you go and you write a $200 check to UT for tuition. This is an incredibly big investment with no knowledge for most parents of what they're getting in return.
I just wanted to say I'm an alumni of UCLA, and it's the alumni group that seems to be doing those kinds of studies. I get surveyed all the time. So, that may not be meeting what you're looking for, but I think it's being done. And I don't know what UCLA alumni does with those results, but I know that I do get asked those
Baylor
questions.
does exit interviews.
Well, I remember there was a state law when I started teaching at UT that it was required to collect student satisfaction ratings. And I kept trying to find mine. I wanted to learn about it. And I found out that the legislator actually said you had to collect them, but they forgot to say you had to publish them. So I had to actually file a Freedom of Information Act to figure out where the heck my ratings went. Now that's all public and on the internet, partially because of that Freedom of Information request. So I do think a lot of it's collected. The question is it published in a way that students and parents can get to it? All my suggestion is try to put that in legislation and see what kind of pushback you get. It'll be really interesting.
Education has, I fear, rightly been under fire in the private sector and the public sector for using government funds at an enormous rate with very little or no reporting, and this is what this is about. The Apollo group was under fire at one point. and a number of universities have been under fire. What do you guys plan on doing assertively to reassure your customers, the American people who pay for this, in part, that you are doing your due diligence and you are putting out a product that is superior? Because starting with primary school, the product has been proven inferior. Now, I did work for a for-profit college, and our standards were insane. You lost a student, you got in trouble. You didn't find him a job because we had a placement service, you got in trouble. And I see that internally some schools do and some schools don't, but there's no, it seems to be general requirement for a perfect product, as there is in manufacturing, when government funds are involved.
Well, I can address that as far as some of the initiatives that we're piloting at University of Phoenix, because we asked the question that several people asked today, and that is, what's the return on investment? And how do we know that the students are being successful once they graduate? The way we have approached it is very pragmatic, and I do not apologize for that. But we've gone to over 2,000 employers across the country, because what the employers tell us is we have over 3 million jobs that are open in this country right now, unfilled. And we have no one to fill them because higher education is failing us. They're not giving us what we need. We're working with those employers, asking them what they need, asking them what the competencies are that we can layer into our academic curriculum. Not change the academic curriculum, not become what people would think of as vocational, but saying, what, besides critical thinking, besides being able to do basic computation and read and write, what do you need in your industries? So our basic relationship has changed significantly with corporate America, in which we're not saying, send us your students and we'll educate them. We're asking them, how do we help you? We are now infusing our curriculum with that information that we're getting from our 2,000 partners. In fact, some of them are, if you watch the morning news, you will see there's a new advertisement for University of Phoenix that talks about who some of those corporate partners are, and they're major partners. What we'll then be able to do is work directly with those employers to see how our students are successful, because there will be an ongoing dialogue between our students, the university, and those employers, letting us know whether or not we are meeting the needs of corporate America. That's our first step in that direction right now.
I sit in both worlds. I employ 300 hairstylists who go to professional school, and I teach government at the University of Texas. And I have to look at these issues all the time in terms of my personal life, because I wonder, what are my students in constitutional development going to do after college if they don't go to law school? On the other hand, I have to go out every day and try to find quality hairstylists coming out of a for-profit college that are very poorly trained there. So we have to retrain them. And I know when I go into the university that most of my hairstylists will be making more than my students, at least till they're 35, amortizing the cost of college and looking what their income is. And it's very difficult, and I'm not sure how it's going to get sorted out. I don't want the government to tell the parents how to do this. I'm not sure I trust the government to tell them what the facts and figures are. On the other hand, I got a note from a student that wanted a recommendation. She said, well, Professor, I haven't worked much since college. I'm trying to get this job in retail at North Star. And she was a very bright young woman, coming out of the business school, by the way. So every day I kind of look at this and say, well, what What can I do? Am I a fraud going to teach in the government department? How am I going to give them value? And my focus is on critical thinking, because I know half of what I teach them won't be true probably in 2 weeks, let alone 2 years.
I teach Middle East studies, so
Yeah.
you got nothing on.
It's difficult. So this is really a valuable discussion, but I'm not sure what the end is here. Is the end going to just be the market? And if it is the market, then bricks and mortar colleges are going to be gone.
Can I give you?
Oh, and by the way, I'm saying one disclosure. My son wants to apply to Acton. I employ a Getterman. That's at Baylor, all the schools. Getterman. And one of my good friends is on the board of one of your competitors. Virginia U.
Well, I'd like to give you reason for hope, because I think there is a lot of reason for hope. If you look at what Wikipedia did to the Encyclopedia Britannica, I think you're going to see a technology-enabled return to the master-apprentice approach. I think you're going to be able to see what we're seeing in our elementary school. Our students, by the way, are now 5 grade levels above age with all the new game-based adaptive technology, particularly math. I don't think we need another math teacher in the United States. I mean, it's amazing what these programs can do. And so I think you're going to see, or I hope you're going to see, the use of this new technology. And it's not the internet, it's the pedagogy. It's the new way of engaging people and making them excited about learning and rewarding them for that, coupled with what almost looks like Little League coaches. I mean, we're going to be able to I think, separate the coaching and affirming the things we do as teachers to change lives, which is mainly by saying, I think you're special and can really do something. And we'll be able to do that and give them real-world challenges to help with critical thinking, and then use the game-based adaptive stuff for skills. I think that's coming. We believe we can actually deliver K through 12 education for about $1,500 a year. We're not there yet, but we think we can. We think we can actually train our middle schoolers and high schoolers to do most of the guiding at the elementary and middle school ages. It's extraordinary what these young people can do when you turn them loose with the right incentives, in a sense that they, in fact, are heroes on a hero's journey. So I think there's tremendous change coming, and it's going to be very positive and return America back to what we were like at the time of the revolution.
Well, if I can touch on what you're doing, I think training hairdressers to be good hairdressers is an important thing. Training people in how the government works is also an important thing. I think one of the concerns that I, as a traditional academic, worry about is that we become almost too reductionistic, reducing education to, there's a lot of talk, and I would very much disagree with you, that it's all about money. I don't think it's all about money. I think it has to do with ethics, it has to do with values. Money is certainly a component, but it's not all about money. We have to, for our liberty, for our democracy to survive, we have to have not just people who can run a factory, but we have to have intelligent thinkers. I believe it was Jefferson, and boy, I'll butcher the quote, who said, if we think that we can have liberty and an uneducated public, that you're hoping for something that never has been and never will be. So I think it's an admirable thing to do, to teach our students, our leaders, not just how to make a buck, but how to be good citizens, how to be ethical behaviors in a sometimes morally ambiguous world.
We're going to have to close here in a minute. I just want to just add to your point here. Jefferson said that nation that expects to be both ignorant and free expects what never was and never will be.
And that I'm sure is more accurate.
And, but you know, but I cannot, as someone who is both a professor and an administrator at traditional nonprofit universities, note the irony with which we in the nonprofits today are now somehow defending something that we, especially we in the humanities over the last 50 years, dismantled. As someone who taught Plato and Aristotle at the college level for 20 years, I would be the first to say that college is more than simply job training. I would say college makes possible greater freedom on 2 levels. One, political freedom, and then even higher than that, intellectual freedom. Political freedom meaning students need to learn the principles of self-government if they're to continue self-government in the future. By intellectual liberty, I mean training students through studying the great ideas to transcend the limitations of their own culture, the presuppositions of their own culture, animated by Socrates' assertion that the unexamined life is not worth living. But It is we in the humanities over the last 50 years, in the nonprofits, who abandoned civic education. Today, fewer than 10% of public colleges and universities across the country require even one course in American government. And as far as intellectual freedom, the highest freedom of all, the freedom to transcend the presuppositions of your culture, it is we in the humanities who for 50 years have been teaching students that there is no such thing as a transcendent truth to which we can aspire. We kill the humanities, so it's a little ironic that we're now saying, oh my God, you've turned university education into job training. We're going to have to re-examine our premises if we're going to actually reform higher education. Thank you all for coming.